When one is horrible, it means that there is nothing that is objectively good and progressive that will come out of such individual.
If you have been convicted of an offense before and you have been pardoned, and anybody is trying to bring that up against you and calling you a convict, you have the power to sue that person for defamation.
Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen by all to have been manifestly done.
Every citizen has a right and every citizen has an obligation.
That a plea of ultra-virus acquit or convict is very different from the plea of pardon.
Trespass is that act that interferes with the peaceful.
No matter how minute this,
right? No matter how minute.
Who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Hello, you are welcome to another fresh episode of the program Justify Nigeria on ACNN television, reaching you from Abuja. On today's episode, our subject of discussion will be the legal concept of value-added tax, popularly known as VAT. My name is Anoze Chinom, so your anchor. Tax is simply defined as a compulsory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, which could also be added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. Before now, the value-added tax VAT in Nigeria has always been collected by the federal government through its agency called Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS. But recently, there has been a challenge and uncertainty between the state government and the federal government on whom to collect the value-added tax. This quagmire publicly started when the governor of Rivers State, His Excellency Nyesom Wike, got a judgment on his favor that Rivers State government is empowered by law to collect the value-added tax. Similarly, the Lagos State government has followed suit by enacting and passing state law on taxation that empowers them to receive any income flowing from value-added tax. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has since gone to appeal court in order to reverse the decision of the Federal High Court. Joining us now in the studio to clarify some of the legal issues surrounding all of this is Barrister Joe Mobalaji. He is a leadership clarity coach and a personal development trainer. Balaji, former president of Law Students Association, University of Abuja, and overall best student at the mock trial of the Nigerian Law School. He won the Best Orator Award by the Council of Legal Education and also the principal partner of Chizu Law Firm and also a member of Unity Bar here in Abuja. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you to see you again.
Good
yes,
to see you,
thank you. That's right. Now, we are talking about taxation. That's the rave of the moment.
Yes.
And you agree with me that not everybody knows what taxation is all about.
Definitely.
Just briefly give us and explain to us what taxation is, the general overview of taxation.
All right, so taxation first is a statutory levy or a duty payable, by the different individuals of a state to a government. It's a levy that is imposed by law. It is that when we say statutory, that means it is backed by law. So in a layman's term, it's a payment you make from your income or from the opportunity to carry out trade and services within a state as your form of social contract to the government. It's payable to the government, which in turn, the expectation is that the government should provide social amenities for you, like infrastructure, security, hospitality, and the like. So when you say, oh, roads are not working, this is not working, you are saying that from the expectation that you have been paying from your income or from your trade a certain percentage to the government in return, having expectation that the government will be able to take care of those social needs. So it's a social contract between the citizens of a state and the government that is backed up by law.
Okay, so an individual will not say, because the government did not give me a job, I will not pay. It's a statutory thing you have to do.
It's a statutory fee, provided you are getting income.
Income, exactly.
Or you are in one way or the other doing business or trade that is paying you some form of income, maybe from your salary, from your business or whatever. It is expected that because the government has given you that territory, that opportunity of security, you're supposed to in turn pay a certain percentage back to the government as tax.
Does this also extend to corporate organizations? corporations?
Yes,
because
it does.
oh,
It
not
does.
only
Even
individual.
companies, yes, companies, individuals, all those organizations, they are expected to pay tax to the government. Even government workers that work in the government office, they pay tax from their salaries.
Oh, that's correct.
Yes.
So that at the end of the day, the government will use it for development and infrastructure and all those things.
Yes.
Okay, now are there types of tax in a lot of taxation?
Yes, there are. Now, first of all, taxation is classed into two before we even start talking about the various types.
Okay.
We have direct and indirect tax.
Okay, these two major classifications.
Two major pillars.
Yes, let's use that
taxation.
word. Okay.
Yes, the direct taxation is what is directly taxed to your income. So from whatever your paid salary from the office.
For example, I'm paid 10,000 a month.
You're paid 10,000. A particular percentage is debited from it.
That's direct.
Yes. So we have the type of that tax. We call it personal income tax or company income tax. It is directly debited from your profit or from your salary.
So oftentimes you will see an alert, it has already been collected.
Yes, most times from the office, they'll say, this is your salary after tax. That tax they've taken is your personal income tax. Then indirect tax is usually taxed on products, consumables. For example, the value added tax. You go and buy something from the supermarket, they tax you. So you see something in your slip, VAT.
Yes, when you must pay your receipts. You want to
excise duties, stamp duties. They are not taxed directly to your income. They are taxed to products or services you get.
So as you buy that thing, you have indirectly
paid. So now, if we're now looking at the various channels of taxation that you meet every day, we have the personal income tax, which is taxed on individuals from their salaries.
Which is the direct, just explain now.
Yes, we have the company income tax, which is also taxed on companies. So organizations like you asked, so any company that does business is expected that at certain point in time they have to pay tax. Then we have the stamp duties tax that is taxed on documents or any kind of maybe regulatory agency that has to do with documentary things and all that. You pay, for example, I'm sure if people register companies, they pay stamp duties. Maybe you go to court to file something, you pay stamp duties on it. Then we have what we call the profit petroleum tax that is charged on profits that are generated from sale of petroleum goods and all that products. Then we have the capital gains tax. That is any gain you make from sales of maybe properties and all that after you have deducted all the expenses. So from the instrument, they charge the profit you've made, which is usually like 10-15%, varying from jurisdiction. So we have the estate duties. When a person has died and maybe you want to go and apply for probate, maybe you want to go and administer the person's estate, you pay estate duties. Then we have excise tax, customs duties that you pay at the wharf. Maybe someone sends something to you in Nigeria and you want to go and clear it. You pay tax to the customs officers there. So these are the various types. So if you look at it, they are classified into various categories. Some of them are direct. How you know which one is direct? Anytime it's charged directly to your income from source, that's a direct tax. But anytime it's indirect, maybe from the product you bought or maybe a services you engaged with and they charged you based on that, that's an indirect tax.
That's wonderful. There's one you explained there concerning when you must have made your gain.
Yes,
then you take all the expense. In fact, there was one of your colleagues that I was talking with him. He said oftentimes this look like a tithe because when you must have there's a percentage that so even the government also takes tithe.
Yes, and I
but they call it tax.
Why they must be backed up by law to even to be a legal tax. So that means every law, they are created by law, which stem from the Constitution. So this is very important and cardinal. They are backed up by law. So if anybody is asking you to pay tax, because I remember there was a frenzy one time on social media when they were asking that we should start paying tax for social media or start paying tax on data, and there was an argument around that what law backs up this form of tax. So
civil society organization, they rose them up
and they couldn't actually state any law. So in case anybody comes up to you and say, you're supposed to be taxed on this, you must ask, what is the law backing up? And is this law created or a product from the Constitution? That's why even some of the arguments we are going to have subsequently is it must derive itself from the Constitution, because every law the Constitution must give life or enforceability to any law that we say that is a form of regulation in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Barrister. Now you will agree with me that there have been some disagreement between some state government. In fact, we have to be personal about that. River State and other states and federal government over collection of value-added tax.
Yes.
You're a lawyer, a seasoned one at that. Educate us in law. What is actually this agreement all about? Who's supposed to collect this tax?
All right. So now I would say is not cast in stone, because the law is not very clear on this issue. That is why it right now is even before the courts.
Yes.
So, but this is the position of it right now as it stands. First of all, the FIRS believes that
That's Federal
Inland Revenue Service.
That is agency of the
Yes,
federal
which is an
government.
agency of the federal government. Thank you. Believes that based on the provision of the, remember I told you every tax is backed up by law. It's created by law. So for example, in this instance, we are looking at the value-added tax. Value-added tax are taxations made on consumables, any consumable product. So you buy, for example, you go to the supermarket and buy this book. You pay value-added tax for value added.
What about
to this
Coca-Cola?
book.
If I buy
Yes, you buy Coke. Now, what value-added tax means is that value added to a product. For every value added to a product at every stage, you have to be taxed for it.
Barrister, you don't need to rush about this. It's
Yes.
becoming interesting and hot here.
Yes, yes.
You are going to continue when we come back from break.
Okay.
Please, you are to join us again. Hi, you are welcome to the speaker on ACNN television, reaching from Abuja. The speaker is a platform by which we treat some topical issues happening in the polity. On today's segment, we are looking at dignified Nigeria or an undignified Nigeria. My name is Anozie Chinomso. The word dignified is an act of having or showing composed or serious manner that is worthy of respect. When something seems worthy and impressive, just know that it is a product of dignity. It then means that once a nation is dignified, there is maximum level of reverence and confidence that produces manpower and productivity she needs to possess. When a nation is dignified, developmental growth, creativity, and a conducive environment for innovation is assured and guaranteed. On the other hand, the word undignified could simply be put as anybody or thing that appears foolish and unseemly. It then means that the word undignified goes with contemptibility, discapability, and the inferiority that amounts to nothing. When I look at Nigeria as I do often, when I think of Nigeria as I do often, when I imagine about Nigeria as I do often, when I observe Nigeria as I do often, I've always arrived at a conclusion of becoming more confused, which has prompted me to ask on whether we are living in a dignified Nigeria or an undignified Nigeria. The rate in which the current administration of Nigeria is borrowing loans is a perfect example of undignified Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking the approval of the National Assembly to borrow a fresh and new loan of $4 billion from bilateral and multilateral organizations to fund the deficit in the 2021 budget is another reason to believe that we are living in an undignified Nigeria. With the current exchange rate of $1 equals 550 naira, the new loan of $4 billion will amount to about 2.2 trillion naira. What an undignified country. What kind of conscience does these political leaders have? How do they manage to sleep at night? Does borrowing of loans from institutions part of the change this current government promised Nigeria? Is excessive and unbelievable borrowing of loans another way of fighting corruption? Or is it that what we are seeing and the excruciating pains we are passing through on a daily basis is the meaning and result of I belong to nobody and I belong to everybody? Oh Lord, please come over to Nigeria and save us. When a politician is in the business of licking up his own vomit and went ahead to defend his action, is a perfect way to showcase that we are living in an undignified Nigeria. Chief Femi Fani-Kayode, who did this to you? Why, how, and when have you become a political chameleon? A few years ago, You eloquently castigated the ruling All Progressive Congress APC and called them all sorts of names. And yet, you finally joined them after all. What a shame. May I remind you of your own words through your tweets at exactly 4:26 p.m. on December 13th, 2019. And I quote, "I will rather die than join a filthy rat-infested sinking ship like the Amajiri People's Party APC." You even referred APC to Amajiri People's Party. Femi Fani-Kayode. These were your own words. Do you know the gravity of what you have done? Do you know that you have made a history for your children and those yet unborn as the most shameless and undignified father in the world? Are you this hungry? Is your quest an unwarranted desire of remaining in the corridors of power this insatiable? When has politics become the only job you know how to do? I will not be surprised if tomorrow you join PDP if they seize power again. Why wouldn't these politicians have sense for once? Things like this could make one to know that we are living in an undignified Nigeria. An undignified Nigeria exists when government fails to provide the basic amenities to her citizens. An undignified Nigeria exists when the exercise of the fundamental human rights, as contained in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, the supposedly grown norm can no longer be exercised. An undignified Nigeria exists when massive genocide and homicide of citizens means nothing to the government, but the welfare of cows is the major priority and concern to the government. An undignified Nigeria exists where bandits and terrorists are canonized and harmless IPOB members are demonized. An undignified Nigeria exists when borrowing of loans and lack of positive ideology and leadership skill is the best the government could offer. An undignified Nigeria exists where politicians seize political maturity as longevity, while in actual sense, political maturity is dependent and measured on the existence of political responsibility. An undignified Nigeria exists where politicians make lies and greed their creed. An undignified Nigeria exists where lack of contentment has become the bedrock and baptismal name of politicians. An undignified Nigeria exists where all of us are co-authors of our own misfortune. In order to justify Nigeria, I therefore speak. Until our politicians listen to and obey the ancient clarion call of cutting down the cost of governance, begin to utilize these borrowed loans in a useful manner by building industries, strengthening institutions, strong economy, and enough job opportunities so that the future generation will not suffer in abject poverty, become contented of what they already had, and kill the demonic monster of insatiability in order to make themselves and the nation dignified, we shall continue to live in an undignified Nigeria instead of a dignified Nigeria. My name is Anozie Chinomso. I just want to speak. Glad to know that you are still there, and we are still here in the studio with Barrister Ojo Mobolaji. Barrister, you are making an interesting thing. In fact, I was enjoying at the same time it was hot here in the studio. Now, you are trying to explain what it is now as of law. That is why these things are before the court. Please take it up from there.
All right, so I was explaining what value-added tax in itself means. So, for example, a carpenter goes to the forest, cuts trees, and prunes them, takes those woods and carries the wood to the carpentry shop, sells the wood to a carpenter. Now the carpenter buys the wood from him. When the carpenter develops the wood into furniture, that development he made, that value he brought on the wood, he pays value-added tax to it. For example, he put oil, he puts all those things. Those things that gives value to the product is what is referred to as value-added tax. And those value-added tax are usually charged on consumables, products we use every day, soap, clothes,
drinks.
That's why if you notice even the
Let me be funny somehow. If cigarettes, is it possible? Even
consumables, provided that
alcohol as well.
Yes, alcohol. That's why if you notice the argument, even within the states, where like some states even ban alcohol, but they are enjoying from the proceeds of the value-added tax. So why should it be?
That's the argument.
Yes. Now, coming back to the law now.
Yes.
Based on this, I told you that every tax is backed up by the law. So we have what we call the Value Added Tax Act. That is an enactment of the federal government, the National Assembly. Because anytime you hear an act, it is an enactment or a provision, a formulation of the National Assembly, which is an agency of the federal government. So now it's an arm, though, but it stems from it's a federal law. So now, based on this, the Value Added Tax Act states that the responsibility of collection of value added tax should be vested in the Federal Inland Revenue Service. That is the provision of the Value Added
That's
Tax
what the law states.
Act. Yes, the Value Added Tax Act.
Okay.
Now, however, remember I said every law stems from the Constitution. The Constitution.
Okay, you are now going to the Constitution,
Yes,
which is the
now,
ground norm now.
which is now
that
the ground
every
norm.
law is under.
Yes. Now, the Constitution under, we have what we call the exclusive list,
Yes.
the concurrent list, and the residual list.
Just briefly, can you
Yes.
just tell our viewers, because
Okay.
they may not, just
Now,
briefly, before you just
yes,
briefly.
everything under the legislative list is the things that are under the purview of the federal government exclusively. So anything is the second schedule of the Constitution. Anything you find under the legislative list is something that the federal government has exclusive power to manage.
Nobody
Yes, it's exclusive to the federal government. Concurrent is within the federal government and state government, while residual list is exclusively within the state government. State government. Now, the argument, because something happened. First of all, we had the case of Ukala versus the Federal Inland Revenue Service, where there was a case between Ukala and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, where he was stating that, looking at yes, I know value-added tax states that it is within the reserve of the Federal Inland Revenue, but if you check the exclusive list, there is nothing in the exclusive list that states that value-added tax should be collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Let's also even come to the concurrent list. Nothing also in the concurrent list states that the Federal Inland Revenue Service should collect tax. But if you check the residual list, there is an implied provision there that states that value-added tax should be collected by the state. So why should we be paying value-added tax to the federal government when there is no clear provision in law?
In the Constitution.
In the Constitution, that should be the ground norm. And he took the case to court, and the court saw reasons with him and said, wait, let's look at this. There is no clear provision. And impliedly, if it's not within the purview of the exclusive list and the concurrent list, it should be within the purview of the residual list. Looking at it, impliedly, the provision is there. So stating based on that, the federal government has no rights. And now, under the Value Added Tax Act, it states the sharing formula. It states that 15% of value added tax should go to the federal government, 35% should go to the local government, while 50% should go to the states. So if you look at it, if you calculate all that, that's about 100%. But some states feel cheated, because they say we are working hard, we are developing our state, we are providing economic services and doing more, while some states are just relaxing and they are enjoying off the proceeds. For example, one of the arguments that the governor of Rivers State brought was that we sell alcohol here in our state. We sell alcoholic products. We don't discriminate. But in the north, their alcoholic products are not sold.
Then you are now benefit.
So
how can you reap where you did not sow?
Like the popular adage of monkey they walk,
babu they chop.
Do you understand? So
yes.
it's that. So quickly, Wike instituted a case which was the most recent, which between the Attorney General of Rivers State versus the Attorney General of the Federation, where they argued vehemently that there is no provision where value-added tax should be paid to the federal government. So it should be within the state, because if the states are working and providing a conducive environment for people to do business, they should reap up the proceeds of what they're doing.
Sir.
Remember, like we said, it's a social contract between the citizens and the state. So if I've provided security, light, natural amenities for you to do business, then I should be able to reap off the proceeds of the business, and not the federal government that does little or nothing within the state. And that was the argument. And the court saw reasons with them and granted judgment on behalf of the state. However, the federal government Inland Revenue appealed. And this was their position on appeal.
Okay.
They stated that under the exclusive list, we can see a provision for trade and commerce. And remind you, federal value-added tax is predicated on trade and commerce because it's business, day-to-day business. Remember I said it's trade on consumable products. So if I'm selling and trading with you, that is trade and commerce. So it says even if the law does not clearly and expressly state that the federal government has, rights to value-added tax, but it states that the federal government has power with trade and commerce, which can be implied. It is open to interpretation. And the court said, well, being that the court was now, because right now it's still in the court.
It's still in the court, and the justices are being they should. In fact, that is where they have to put their legal prowess there.
I don't envy them right now. But the law provides that within 21 days, every business owner, person doing business in Nigeria should file their value-added tax returns. They should have paid. So 21 days was almost coming in that month. And taxpayers, when two elephants fight, it's the ants that suffer.
Of course.
They say, who are we paying to? Because the ordinary businessman was the one in the middle. Who am I paying value-added tax to? Am I paying to the federal government or am I paying state government? And I don't want a situation I pay to state government, federal government will come and hold me. I pay to federal government, state government will come and hold me. So the courts now say, you know what? To settle this matter, let all parties maintain status ante.
And what is that status ante?
Status ante, that means keep paying as you have been paying before. That means
in this case, federal government.
Let it return to how it was.
Which is the federal government.
Which is, yes, the federal government. Keep paying to the federal government until we have given a clear pronouncement on this issue. And I feel that this is a constitutional matter that is vested within the purview of the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court. So I believe that our justices, we are looking and we are believing that justice should not only be done, but should be seen to be
manifestly done.
Because the confidence of the common business owner will be predicated on what my lords and justices do in this case. But if I should just give a personal opinion here,
that's right.
I believe that the bane of tax, because we must look at what is the intention of the draftsmaster. When the draftsmaster was, looking at the various laws of interpretation, we have the ejusdem generis rule, the golden rule, the literal mischief rule. I don't have time to go into that. But the conundrum, the whole foundation of this is to look at what was the intention of the draftsmaster or the draftsman when he was writing this law. I believe that one of the intentions of the
This is your personal opinion now.
This is my personal opinion, and it has nothing to do with what my lords is subjective, is that when they were drafting or preparing the law of taxation, especially as regards to our value-added tax, we must not forget to avert our minds to the issue of social contract. I believe that the people that should reap the most out of tax are the people that are providing the most of social amenities to the common man. So
in this case now, from your argument, is the state government.
Should be the state government. Because who provides security when there is no light? Who has the responsibility to provide water, electricity, security? If there is an issue, for example, the states that are going through banditry, is it the federal government that is winning in or the state government? Yes, there is an overall responsibility on the federal government. But when we weigh the onus of responsibility between the federal government and the state over a state, I think we will agree with me that is the state.
Yes,
and
sir.
if the state government is providing more social amenities, it should be implied that the state should reap off the proceeds of its efforts. I believe, yes, the federal government should partake in some of the percentage of the tax, but I believe the chunk of it should go to the state government, and the state government should regulate its collection.
Maybe in future we'll look at you becoming a justice of Supreme Court so that you give this a federal.
Well, like I said,
let them do whatever. Yes. Now we have just a few minutes to end the program. Yes. Just in a short while, what is your advice to the federal government and the state government? What's just your advice?
My advice to the federal government is that, first of all, this is an issue of a case of social engineering. Remember, the law is a tool for social engineering, and it's also at the end of the day to boost the faith and the hopes of the common man. Now, it is the responsibility of the state to cater for its citizens. And in return, the citizens are to give a form of percentage as form to appreciate and encourage the state in doing its responsibility. I feel that there will not be much debate if the federal government and state government is seen to do what it ought to be doing. Because most times we see that people don't even pay their tax, they evade their tax because they can't really see what the state is doing.
What do you mean by evading?
People don't pay tax. People
there's
cover up.
Tax evasion.
Yes, tax evasion,
and
which
avoidance.
is a crime, yes.
Okay, but avoidance is not a crime.
Yes, avoidance is not a crime. But evasion, that means avoidance is that you try not to pay, which eventually when they pay, you pay penalty. Okay. But evasion is that you play with the numbers.
you falsify your
yes, you
number.
falsify your records, which is a crime, and is chargeable in law. You know, so some people evade tax. I'm not justifying those behaviors, but this grows when people cannot see how their tax is being used. Presently, we have a high case of insecurity in the state, in the land. We have a high case of kidnapping. We have a high case of terrorism, banditry. People cannot feel free to travel anymore. Our roads are impoverished. People are struggling to barely eat 3 square meals, and then you are expecting them to pay tax. So this is an issue that we need to look into. My advice to the federal government and state government is not to look at, oh, let's just collect tax. What are we using the tax for? And if the state government has the propensity to do more, then let's allow the state government to collect the tax. And if the state government feels that the federal government has the propensity to do more for its citizens, even inclusive of the state, let then the state allow the federal government. I believe what the court should look at is who is doing more or who is likely to do more. Just like a married couple that wants to take ownership of their child, custody. The court will not just look at who is the finest parent, or who speaks better English, or who is the head of the family. The court will look at who has the propensity of taking care of the overall good of the child. What is the best interest of the child? I think we can bring this to bear in this issue. What is the best interest of the common man?
What is the best interest of the common man? Let my laws, the justice of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal decide that for the betterment of its citizens. We want to appreciate you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us what we need to do in this tax law. We appreciate you.
Thank you
and maybe when they are looking for another lawyer, they will hire you.
Yes,
And you will do well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is objectively believed that tax is an obligation that must be complied with. It also serves as a political patrol that enables the administrative mobility of government to function very well. We use this medium to call on the federal government and state government to sit down and iron out issues in this regard in order to maintain peace and order in the polity. This is because this series and plethora of cases in court on whom to collect what we rather cause more political harm than good. It is therefore advised that both the states championing this cause and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, should cease hostilities and maintain the status quo until the Court of Appeal or probably Supreme Court finally pronounces on this matter. This is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of Justify Nigeria. Join us same time, same station on another fresh episode of the program. Until then, this is Anoze Chinomso, wishing you the very best and bye for now.